Hi everyone, I'm Taylor Hudak with Activism Munich and I'm outside the Old Bailey Courthouse in London. This is the beginning of the third week of Julian Assange's extradition hearings.
It's only one decision. No extradition.
Professor and computer scientist Kristen Grothoff was the first defense witness to testify today. Grothoff spoke about the timeline of events, specifically the publication of unredacted cables. Grothoff testified that this all began when David Lee and Luke Harding of The Guardian included a password in a book that they published in 2011. Grothoff stated that the German publication Freitag then wrote a story about this password being available in the book, which then led the unredacted cables to be made public on a torrent website, and then eventually they were published on Cryptome. Therefore, the defense is once again making its case that WikiLeaks was not the first organization to publish these documents. Is this a selective prosecution?
This is actually, it's a 10-year long, culminating in a particular and selective prosecution, which probably you could say was before our eyes a slow motion assassination of Julian Assange.
During the afternoon, the court heard more evidence that this is a political case with the testimony of journalist and activist Cassandra Fairbanks. Fairbanks testified that in 2018, she learned from Arthur Schwartz, a supporter of President Trump and associate of Richard Grenell, that Assange would be charged for the Manning leaks and taken from the Ecuadorian embassy. After Fairbanks learned of this information, she traveled to London to meet with Assange in the Ecuadorian embassy, where she notified him of this information. I am now joined by journalist Cassandra Fairbanks, who provided the court with testimony earlier today. Cassandra, I want to thank you for joining me, and if you could just explain and go over the main points of your statement to the court.
Yeah, thank you for having me. So I'll just start at the beginning, I guess. In October 2018, I published an interview with Julian Assange's mother, Christine, and it was a pretty basic article. She was calling for a pardon. She made points as to why, it would be in Trump's interest to pardon Julian. Pretty harmless stuff. And at the time, I was in a Twitter DM group with a bunch of people from the administration. Rick Grenell was in there, a bunch of people from Trump's campaign, Arthur Schwartz, who's known as Donald Trump Jr.'s informal fixer. He also works for Rep. Lee Zeldin and does communications for Rick Grenell, who at the time was the German ambassador. And so I posted the article in there. There was a lot of other journalists, social media influencers, just a bunch of people in Trump world were in there. And people would post articles all the time, things that they thought were important, that they were trying to get to the administration. People who worked in the campaign would post things in there that they were trying to get out. It was basically just, a share group. So I put the article in there hoping that it would, maybe find a sympathetic ear with someone or, get to the right person. Didn't think anything of it. About 10 minutes later, I got a phone call from Arthur Schwartz. He was on a rampage. I had never heard him like this before. And I know him. I lived in DC at the time, so I would see him at bars. He was friends with a lot of my friends. I knew him, but he called and he was just outraged. And he was like, stop advocating for a pardon. It isn't going to effing happen. He told me that they were going to go into the embassy to get Julian. I responded that that would be an act of war, for the U.S. to go into a sovereign nation's embassy. And he said, not if they let you do it. And then he kept making all these crazy claims about how Julian got patriots killed. He kept using the word patriots, which is something that the Pentagon testified did not happen during the Manning trial, and that the prosecution testified did not happen in these hearings. But he kept saying it over and over, and he was saying that, originally Don Jr. and Grenell and all these people supported Julian, they supported WikiLeaks, but that they changed their mind after they saw the evidence, and that, people would understand my support for Julian from in the past, but that they wouldn't be so understanding now that I knew the truth, and that Julian was this bad guy, and, that there was a deal to go in to get him. And it was just a really long and bizarre phone call. I wish I had recorded that one, but it was, he gave me a lot of information, which on his part wasn't very smart, because I was probably the one person that he knows that actually talked to Julian and that cared about this. But he was basically trying to imply that I would be in better standing with like Don Jr. and people close to Trump and in Trump world if I dropped it. And it was vaguely threatening, and there was a lot. So fast forward to January, I went and visited Julian in the embassy, and I told him everything. And I was like, this is bizarre. Did you do anything that would piss off Sheldon Adelson, or, what's going on? And he was like, no, I don't think so. And it's ironic now because we know Sheldon was involved with the surveillance, but I didn't know Grinnell was involved in the deal to arrest Julian. And so we were trying to figure out why he was doing this and why there was so much pressure to influence me. And I told him that it was going to be about the Manning release. And I also spoke to Chelsea Manning, and I told her that they were, it sounded like they were gearing up to go after her again. And that was pretty much that. Then in March, I went to go visit Julian again, and the Ecuadorian embassy locked me in a room. They wouldn't let Julian come in because they didn't want him to bring in a noise muffler. We were using a radio previously with just white noise and static on it to kind of muffle our voices from being picked up. They didn't want him to bring that in. They made a huge fuss about it. He got into a big fight with the ambassador. It was crazy. So I asked Arthur about that, and he was like, I know about it, but I can't tell you. He had also told me that there was a State Department investigation into who leaked me the information that I gave to Julian, which I told him in person. So that means that people in the U.S. government were discussing my meeting with him, and that they saw it, and that they were spying on a, political refugee. So that all that went down. Then Julian was arrested, and Rick Grinnell was being floated to replace John Bolton. And a lot of people who support WikiLeaks were being like, yeah, this is great. Rick Grinnell is this great pro-Trump MAGA guy, whatever. So I tweeted an ABC News article, and I was like, Grinnell tried to get me fired for tweeting about this before, but he is the one who arranged the deal for Julian's arrest. And he's sketchy, and he tried to get me fired for saying that he was involved. So, I was just tweeting that I didn't like him, basically. And a couple hours later, Arthur Schwartz called me again, and he was unhinged, saying that he was going to go to jail, that I was tweeting classified information. And then he said that I was punishing him for Grinnell acting on orders of President Donald Trump when he arranged the arrest of Julian Assange. And I learned about Rick's role in it after Julian's arrest from an ABC News article. It was buried halfway down the article, said that Rick Grinnell had worked out a deal in October. The same month I got the original phone call. So everything kind of came together at that point.
So to be clear here, is it true that then President Trump essentially asked and requested for Assange to be arrested?
Yeah, that's what Arthur Schwartz told me, and all the information that he told me leading up to this turned out to be true and exactly what happened. So I have no reason to believe that it wouldn't be true.
Is there anything else you would like to add about your statement, about what has happened so far in the extradition hearings?
Well, I think that if this is a fair trial, I don't see any way that they could grant the extradition. I think it's pretty clear that it's political. I think that it's, extremely chilling if this is allowed to happen. I think that it'll be, it'll hurt investigative journalism for years to come. I don't think that there would be any way to bounce back from it. So hopefully she does the right thing and frees Assange.
It is important to remember that during this time in 2018, the embassy was under surveillance by the Spanish security firm UC Global, who was then sending the footage to American intelligence. And because Cassandra Fairbanks' communications with Assange were known to American intelligence, it became very clear that she was under surveillance. Court will resume tomorrow morning, and over the next few days, we expect to hear medical experts testify on behalf of the defense. So please make sure that you do subscribe to our YouTube channel, as we will continue with our live coverage here in London. I'm Taylor Hudak with Activism Munich, and thank you all for watching.